perfectly already now without saying. So I urge you to keep that in mind, and so that we can avoid unnecessary distractions. For the interactions and questions, yes. Okay. For the interactions and questions, there will be two options to raise those. So you can use the chat window to write your questions at any time of the sessions. So please, I encourage you, whenever you think you have a question to a specific topic, to a specific presenter, please just write them down in a chat window. And after each of the presentations, we will have questions and answer sessions. And there we will take your questions, we will answer those, as well as in that time, we will of course accept any new questions that you might have. And for the video, I encourage you to turn on your video cameras once you are speaking, and especially in the group discussions after lunch. Let's make this discussion as real as possible. And please let me know, are there any questions on the organization of the event? If not, then I suggest we start from the first presentation of today. And let me welcome Sigita Trainauskienė from Strata with the first presentation on the preparation for the renewal of State Progress Strategy Lithuania 2030.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be able to address such a highly esteemed audience, and I thank the organizers for the opportunity. This is a challenging task, to be the first presenter in this web conference and to make sure that you do not switch off to your regular tasks or play your favorite video online games during my presentation. So I'll try to do my best and say a few words on the progress of development of a renewed Lithuania's long-term strategy, or Lithuania 2050. But before doing that, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Sigita Trainauskienė. I have 15 years of experience working at the civil service, as I believe most of you here. Since the year 2000, I was responsible for the international relations of the Parliament. Started as the head of Interparliamentary Relations Division, and since 2007, after winning another open competition, had been working as the Director of International Department. A couple of years later, I got enrolled into PhD studies as I wanted to go deeper into my subject, that was parliamentary diplomacy, which eventually led me to another range of bigger questions, that is policy making, or as I like to call it, statecraft, the art and science of managing the state. I graduated in 2015, and then I decided to move on and to gather some new experience in cultural and academic spheres. Since autumn 2018, I joined Strata, former Mosta, to work on project of establishment of evidence-based policy-making competence center. And I must say, I truly believe in the mission of this project and find it really meaningful, and I really enjoy it. Questioning existing operating models and active innovation are essential parts of strategic thinking. According to such authorities as the OECD, capability for renewal will be a key success factor for nations. I chose this excerpt from an excellent report of Finnish government on development of strategic leadership instruments in government as an introduction and leitmotif for my presentation. I think this quote grasps the very essence of our task and the way our mindset should be framed and structured. Why Finland? We know that all Nordic countries are often admired for plenty of reasons, and good governance is being one of them. But the most recent Insights Index, which stands for the International Civil Service Effectiveness Index, ranks Finland as #1 in the world for policy making. That means covering such broad themes as the quality of policy advice, the degree of strategic planning, the coordination of policy proposals across government, and the degree of policy monitoring during implementation. So, Lithuania 2050. Why do we need a new strategy? As at least some of you might recognize from the picture, we still do have a valid Lithuania 2030 strategy. Or if to put a question in more general terms, why a state needs a strategy at all? The simplest answer I could give you is because the same as ask the government to bring a proposal for a new strategy by the end of next year. And that's already a perfectly good reason for us to start working on it. But if you want to go deeper, the answer perhaps would not be so simple. I bet in the context of COVID crisis, many of you have heard of terms like VUCA world, black swans, and other concepts, which might lead to thinking that plans mean nothing in this unpredictable, turbulent world. However, many of you might also remember that Dwight Eisenhower once said, planning is everything, the plan is nothing. So what about long-term planning? There were voices even before this crisis telling that states currently are incapable of producing long-term visions and strategies as they are run by politicians who are concerned with short-term strategies of how to win the next election. Equally, the private sector is incapable of producing long-term visions for society as a whole, as they are dominated by short-term interests of making a profit. Thus, they were advocates, and they were voiced by such esteemed international institutions as World Economic Forum, that the only structures able to have a long-term political vision are those that are completely independent in their way of thinking. These are structures whose only influence comes from their beneficiaries, that is, civil society. In Lithuania, there are already some voices in civil society that reaffirm the claim for the need for a new long-term strategy for our state. Romas Švedas, who is the former Vice Minister for Energy, has stated recently that Lithuania lives without a strategy, as Lithuania 2030 is nothing but a formal and forgotten document. Neither politicians nor civil servants are guided by it, except for formal reasons. Society and business do not know about it, and they are not involved in the implementation of it, and its monitoring is lacking. Mr. Švedas has also argued that the life cycle of a state could be compared to that of any organization which lives in certain cycles. Here you see his interpretation of Butler's model. The most dangerous stage is the so-called plateauing, meaning a rather stable stage which is reached after steady growth and development. If an organization does not find any new challenging goals bringing renewal, it means a stagnation leading to a decline and eventual death. Our famous historian Professor Bumblauskas presented his own view on Lithuania's state history by dividing it into certain periods. Following this scheme, the recent accession to Lithuania into major Euro-Atlantic structures is seen as a certain apex in nearly 800 years of our history. But since then, according to Mr. Švedas, we have reached a stage of plateauing. And he poses a question, which is a question I believe for all of us. What's next? What is the goal of Lithuania? What's a strategy for Lithuania? These ideas, I can assure you, are already being discussed in some civic meetings and forums in Lithuania today. Although the phenomenon of strategy, as we all know, comes from military sphere, where it can be essentially reduced to a question of how to win a war. In modern times, strategy is often meant for business, and in the era of mediatization, I could probably say that is a question for communicators. Strategies nowadays are expressed in terms of vision, mission, and done by means of SWOT and similar analytical techniques. According to Jack Welch, the head of General Electric, the mission should answer the question of how you intend to win in this business. The win indicator protects against the widespread mistake of formulating a mission when the goal is to do everything for everyone always. That encourages organizations to refine and describe their strengths and weaknesses, choose the right people, tools, make the necessary investments. So, do we have a good strategy from the business people point of view? The quite recent report from the World Economic Forum on Global Competitiveness Index 2019 presents a good overview on various aspects of governance across world countries. Here, I would like to show you how Lithuania scores according to future orientation of government. This indicator was compiled mainly according to results of survey from business managers. This survey is being done for nearly 40 years now. In this particular slide, I would like to draw your attention to two particular lines. According to government's responsiveness to change, we rank as number 94 out of 141 countries in the world, and according to government's long-term vision as number 90. To me and my colleagues, this is the best proof to the question whether we need a new strategy. And that is why the project of strengthening strategic planning led by the Office of the Chancellery is important and why our today's discussion is important. When I studied political science, one of my favorite pieces was The Essence of Decision by Graham Allison. For those of you who are not familiar with it, I can tell that Allison used the Cuban Missile Crisis as a case study for future studies into governmental decision-making. It reveals the whole complexity of phenomena when a decision maker acts under circumstances of extreme uncertainty and understanding of very high stakes of the decision. Among other things, it also reveals that there are many potential perspectives onto the same issue, as well as many potential futures that could develop on the basis of a decision taken today. Why I am telling this story? Because this is how we look at the strategy formation exercise. Our future depends on the decisions made today. Also, there could be not necessarily a single, but several futures we could think of. But when thinking of them, what we should keep in our minds is the essence or raison d'être of the state itself. According to Aristotle, it comes to be for the sake of life and exists for the sake of the good life. We notice that similar exercises, thinking about potential future or futures, if you wish, recently went on in our neighboring states, such as Estonia, Poland, and others. It would be interesting to note here that when we visited our colleagues in UK Government Office of the Sign last autumn, we also asked them whether they have UK 2050 strategy, but their answer was no. Such long-term strategies tend to be so abstract that they are of little value for real policy making, they said. Thus, we prefer some more specific topics, as for instance, future of mobility. But as you are a small country, it might be different for you, they said. Indeed. The Baltic states, because of our geopolitical situation, are in constant need of thinking about long-term existential issues and strategies, but perhaps not only about them. Another great country, our neighboring Poland, has recently produced a strategy visioning their country as making a ballerina's leap and joining the economic big league, which is inspiring indeed. Small note, the strategy was prepared by a McKinsey company. Would we like that? We've also studied the example of another country well known to many Lithuanians, Ireland. They devoted nearly 4 years for their project Ireland 2040 and involved many stakeholders across the whole country in developing the vision for Ireland, starting from letters of ordinary people of how they would like to see their small neighborhoods in the future to be developed, and ending with very concrete investment plans telling where the money should be invested today in order we live the country of our dreams in 20 years. Will that continue to be a dream country not only for Irishmen, but for many Lithuanians too? That is also among questions we should ask ourselves. Having started the journey, we started to look at various strategies as documents as well, not only the process of producing them. What is in the content, how they are phrased and structured. Here you see excerpts from several strategies. Can you tell which belongs to which country? Do you see any major differences? Would you be able to identify yourself with any of these? Would you wish such a future for yourself? How would you phrase a vision for Lithuania in this case? Remember what makes a good strategy? How do you intend to win? So that is the question we should strive to answer within the next year and a half. That means, how can we assure that our state continues to exist for us and for the sake of the good life? So let me now introduce you to the way we see our road to the development of Lithuania 2050 strategy. About a year ago in our institution, we started to develop ideas on Policy Lab. That is a structure responsible for innovative policy ideas and creative solutions. And I should thank Lucas in this point for supporting us in this effort. In this context, we got acquainted with the EU Policy Lab, a unit in the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Among other methods being used by this unit is strategic foresight, a method for developing of long-term strategies. Thus, when we at Strata got the task of preparation of methodology for development of Lithuania 2050, we consulted a lot with experts working there. We were also able ourselves to join some activities of Future Government 2030 project that was prepared by this team, and we admired their approach. Another source of inspiration came from another lab, or to be precise, people who once ran the Mind Lab, one of the first innovative policy-making units in the world, and who currently work and are established as Danish Design Center. What is particular about their approach, that foresight is being combined with design methods. These methods allow people to be more involved in the process of futures, not only with their minds, but also with their senses. For instance, what it feels like living in a future welfare state, where you have little cushions all around you, but at the same time, a huge mirror hanging above you. That means there's no place to hide or escape. We've also equipped ourselves with some methodological tools, as for instance, the one you see here. I can highly recommend that. And from all this comes our proposal for the Office of the Government. The basis of it is the so-called classical strategic foresight method, as presented by Joseph Boris in this slide. Strategic foresight, according to OECD, is a structured and systematic way of using ideas about the future to anticipate and better prepare for change. It is about exploring different plausible futures that could arise and the opportunities and challenges they could present. Strategic foresight does not attempt to offer definitive answers about what the future will hold. Foresight understands the future as an emerging entity that's only partially visible in the present, not a predetermined destiny that can be fully known in advance. There are no hard facts about the future, and the evidence base is always incomplete. The objective is not to get the future right, but to expand and reframe the range of plausible developments that need to be taken into consideration. This is what I particularly like about the method, that expands and broadens our thinking, allowing to reflect on various potential futures, and based on this, draw up a roadmap towards our preferred future. The process usually starts with horizon scanning. That is looking at and evaluation of megatrends by using a so-called STEEP perspective, which enables 360 degrees view of the system. The difficult part here is that COVID seems to be changing many things, thus making the whole OECD foresighters community to rethink and re-evaluate anew all trends and givens that seemed to be relevant before. COVID has also strengthened the need of foresighters and foresight methods, as many governments seem to be looking for their advice and building up of different scenarios. In this context, scenarios could be understood as stories that describe alternative ways of external environment, how external environment might develop in the future. Each scenario explores how different conditions might support or constrain delivery of policy and strategy objectives. As Dr. Ramirez from Oxford Said Business School noted, in scenario planning, we are talking about tuna, turbulence, unpredictable uncertainty, novelty, and ambiguity. Any one of those conditions will make traditional forecasting unhelpful. So let me summarize here that by now we have prepared the concept and methodology for development of the new strategy, as well as the draft process plan. These documents are presented for the Office of the Government. You also see here the group of people who are involved in the process. And I am particularly glad that Dr. Bartnikas, a philosopher, graduate from the Cambridge University, and Dr. Obelaine, a sociologist, graduate from the European University Institute, are on board with this project, and I speak today also on their behalf. We planned the main steps as follows. From now on, we will embark on megatrends analysis. If the circumstances warrant, we plan to organize some workshops with experts and stakeholders in autumn, and from there, several scenarios will be prepared. Next spring, a user experience design exhibition based on developed scenarios is planned in one of the museums. This will be open for broader society. We also plan to collect the ideas and feedback. And finally, based on the outcomes of previous stages, a strategy project will be prepared and presented for the next Parliament by December 2021 for further discussions, which hopefully will help us to answer the question of how we are going to win. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sigita, for amazing and interesting presentation. Can I encourage anybody from the audience ask questions now? Okay. Last,
Yeah, sorry. If there are no questions, then I have one for Sigita. I actually somehow got very much about your idea that strategy comes from the war sector and it's about how to win the war. But I believe that nowadays, and particularly during the last few months, when we all have this unknown situation for all the world, I guess that it's better to say not how we're gonna win the war, but how we're gonna win mostly from the cooperation among countries, among societies, among different actors in all the political arena, in the economics and everywhere. So maybe just it's not a question, but it's just an idea that to move from the war, but towards cooperation.
To tell you frankly, the war in this context is more as a metaphor. It means of how do you actually reach your goal. So for me, the strategy is about having a very clear goal and about finding the way of how to reach it. So it is the only explanation that, you know, the term itself comes from the military sphere, where it meant of how you win the war. But now the strategies are being meant and being used in other contexts as well. So for a state to have a strategy is to have a goal, which is for me, to have a good life, actually, for all of us. And that means of how do you reach that goal. And we also thought with my colleagues while preparing this document that somehow there is a tendency to think that we all have to have a uniform goal. But maybe we can also think about the several potential goals that many of us would find their own places in the future and how the future would look like. So therefore, I want to say that in this foresight method, the way I understand it, there are no predetermined answers. And those workshops that are being planned by our team hopefully would allow people to discuss very openly whatever they feel important about the future is. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? And if not, then I think we can move to our, oh yes, we do have another question. So a question to Sigita. Have you evaluated the recently approved concept of the new comprehensive plan of the territory of the Republic of Lithuania 2050? How these documents will correlate?
As we only actually started our work, I'm familiar with the concept that it is being prepared, and we will try to incorporate at least, you know, some major ideas. But I would not be able to now say that we were already evaluating it from the real, from the usual way we understand what is the evaluation. So I would say that yes, we are aware of that document. We also were looking at how it was prepared, and I hope we will use at least, you know, major ideas presented there.
Okay, thank you for the question. Goes to Asta, and thank you for Sigita for the answer. Maybe we have more questions at this point. Okay. Then I suggest we move towards our second presentation, which will touch upon the agile strategic planning, as well as looking how other countries are coping with that topic. And it is my pleasure to give now microphone to Jan Stursson, who is connecting to us from Sweden. Jan?
Yes, hello? Hello?
Yes, Jan, we hear you.
Okay. So maybe you can see me or you just see the screen. I would like to make an introduction before we go to the slides. Thank you very much for allowing me to be with you here. And it's a great honor. And I think you have a very interesting process in play. My background is strategy consultant, running resting advice from the future the last 5 years. Before that, I was colleague with our dear friends of PwC, Lithuania, Sweden. I was the global head of government and public services, including UN, World Bank, IMF, and NATO, and all these global organizations. I worked a lot with the World Economic Forum, future of government, future of governance, future of cities. So that is, I actually remember I visit your wonderful country 2014 with the central government. So I'm not very familiar, but a little bit. So let us kick off now with this. I put together a couple of slides, and we know a mega trend is acceleration. So let's accelerate. Things are moving faster and faster today, and we will keep our time. It's not the corona coughing. I'm free, but I've been just cold because of my grandchildren. So, okay. So now we can share screen. Yes. Okay, great. So, well, history history repeats itself. What have we learned? And I was cleaning my office a week ago, and I found these papers, magazines, 3 years old. Warning, we are not ready for the next pandemic. Okay, so we knew it, yes, we didn't do anything. The Chronicle of Debt, we are increasing debt as never before right now. Who is afraid of cheap oil? Well, quite some guys like Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and Saudi. And the most vulnerable resources, it's not oil, it's information. So we know a lot, but the question is, how do we interpret these figures? So is it still business ignorance, which I think very often the case, including in my own life, in governmental, public sector, private sector. So I think we need to go to business intelligence. We have to leave the ignorance side. It's time to give up traditional strategic planning. I think we have to go from the known. We love what we know. We love the history, but we have to go for the future. Future is not evidence-based. It's a problem. So we have to go to the unknown. And that is, I think, very important. Strategic planning is a living process. It's not dead. It's not material. It's being on a journey on a boat, catching the wind, navigating towards something. We'll come back very clearly to that. And then it's time for what I call real-time knowledge navigation, from the slow analog type of planning to a more faster and digital with new technologies on board, connecting the human capabilities and the technological. So you can say future is about in-between spaces. Technology and human is one. Future and history is another in-between space. And next slide. So how do we perceive the right future? There's a new normal. I think that's very clear. Uncertainty and disruptive things. Do we build windshields or windmills? Question mark. New political landscape, geopolitical. With China, global value chain is going to be more and more dead. We see new Brexit candidates. UK takes a lead on different things, maybe with Norway, with Switzerland, Israel. There's a lot of things happening right now. And we cannot agree on anything, basically, in EU, which is a very big problem. So it's a new thing. Corona has been not postponing things. Corona is advancing things. I think that's the most clear thing. And trying to advance globalization, then we got the big problems of globalizations. So Corona is advancing, accelerating things like technology, surveillance systems, and so on and so forth. Corona is on every strategic agenda now. That's why we will probably have it there for quite some time. How do we cope with this as a strategic standing point on all agendas, helping us to maybe to leapfrog on different areas? So it's also about the new knowledge flow and data analytics. It's about future planning is about visions. Without vision, we cannot possibly navigate. And the vision needs to be so exciting and so energizing and crispy and compelling stories. So with people in the nation, in industry, in government, in not-for-profit sectors, this is it. We're going for it. This is our future, as we heard here from Sigita. about different examples from Ireland and Poland. It needs to be very, very compelling. And I think the point here is, without having a vision, you cannot navigate. You cannot make any plans. All plans without vision is completely useless. And that means we need to find where we should go. Planning is, the curse of strategic planning is we are proactive. Then things happen and then we become reactive. So what do? We should try to be interactive. That's enjoying the show as we go, having a lot of information, interpret those weak signals about what is going on, relevant scenarios to be connected to rapid prototyping. We do testing about what we think is the future. So for that we need new skills. Skills is the second biggest area of budgeting for EU right now. Upskilling and reskilling the workforce of Europe. I've been in that project the last 3 years with PwC Luxembourg, and it's absolutely amazing. So I just ask you, please stay on your toes, figure out where is the money for the future of upskilling and reskilling Lithuania. And then we need a Minister of the Future. The Committee of the Future in Finland in the 90s to year 2005 was an extraordinary successful thing. So where are the ministers of the future? Who is head of futures in every department, in every company, head of skills, and so on and so forth. And that needs leadership, creates meaning and energy. Next slide. Knowledge navigation could be based upon the old technologies, like looking into where we are going with this, you see this navigation system. And next, or this digital. This is real time online, knowing exactly where the boat or the car or where you as a person are in this situation, using the cell phone or using whatever technology. So this is a major shift about thinking of strategic planning. Next. So we have to ask us questions. I think Quizix, the art and science of questioning, like, do we, Lithuania, take the lead in the new in-between spaces we identify? So what are the new in-between spaces? Between Europe and the rest of the world, between Lithuania and EU, between future and history, between technology and human, between cities and nations, and so on and so forth. That's a lot of new in-between spaces. And the question is, who is leading in those spaces? Or very often, basically, no one. It's just a discussion. Who leads together? The in-between space leadership is a key thing. So new industries and clusters, and even cross-clusters, are in the making. We're moving from agriculture and fishing to food and water, from healthcare to well-being, from aviation and automotive to mobility. Completely new industries of new in-between spaces, which needs to be, by definition, defined and used in the new plans for the future. So do we upload or download? We like our ideas and we take them on, we change incrementally, and off we go. That's the downloading approach. That's those who love history, those who love best practice. Best practice takes us to mediocrity. Best option takes us to thrive and create our future together with what is going on interactively. So what's the biggest roadblock for continued Lithuania success? I don't know. Maybe it's a lack of vision. I don't know. But we can ask ourselves finally, do we, the government of Lithuania, do we create or consume a legacy? That is what every politician, every leader, every person, every family, every household has to ask themselves. Do we create or consume a legacy? Let's co-create a great future. So next slide. So the ingredients here is energizing visions. Without that, we will not know if we have arrived or not. Without a vision, we will not know if we have arrived. So planning is then completely obsolete. Then we have a new Lithuania strategic agenda. What's the agenda? Future of technology, future of values, future of geopolitics, future of Corona. We can see here on the right examples. Future of UK and the non-European nations. There's a lot of things. And not least technology and values. I think it's very, very important. And future of skills. So we need intelligence, we need foresight, and we need imagination. So that is an ongoing interpretation of being on that sailboat, trying to catch the wind of the weak signals. What are the weak signals today? Maybe it's a weak signal that Sweden and the Netherlands didn't say, we don't want to pay so much money for free to Southern Europe. That's a very weak, and now we're getting strong signal about something. But how do we look upon financial stewardship? How do we look about putting debt into an organization? How do we scale up EU to be a super state and to have a taxation right? It's a lot of issues. It's a weak signal of something which is far beyond the current structure and way of collaborating. So create scenarios, as we will do later today, and with apply wisdom we have, which is about what have we learned. We have so much knowledge, so we don't need more, but we need wisdom to apply the knowledge. So you can say, in a sense, we are over-educated, but we are under-skilled. That's why the minister of the new department in EU, which was unemployment, it's now called jobs and skills, said we need to focus on skills and upskilling and reskilling and trying to support and serve to upgrade business models and capabilities for people who have a job and who don't have a job. So I think that's the way to make rapid prototypes, find smart funding from EU and other institutions, including private, but the point is here, not to make full scale, it's to make prototypes in small scale, to test, to learn, to go to the future. So that's next slide, please. We're just touching. So there are, yes, stop here. So there are back one. Okay, yeah. So in navigation, we have position, direction, and speed. That's the three ingredients in all navigation, including strategic planning and knowledge navigation. Dimension of business intelligence, high or low, and the level of innovative renewal and speed. Do we renew ourselves? The speed of renewal is the most important thing for a government to take the lead, to be a thought leader, to come closer to the future before the rest. Next. This is very often how it goes. No, back, just the blue one. This is how it looks like. We go out in the boat, wind comes, and we go in the wrong direction, and finally we can agree on, and then we can, okay, here, well, we can now decide. And then we go, here we should change the sail, but we cannot go. So we go here, and it takes a lot of time. So then we get this instead, it's yellow line. It's half the length. It's shorter, it's quicker, it's better. Why is it shorter? Because we now have a stronger vision, we have a stronger business intelligence, we have interpreting weak signals, trying to understand what is going on, and live interactively, not proactively or reactively. We integrate proactive and reactive into interactivity. And we go online, and that's the future of technology, value, skills, trading, commerce, logistics. The global value chain is deteriorating, and the new global currency is data. Which means, how does the government of Lithuania put out the right platforms, securing the data, having the data governance, and the issues of integrity for the people, those who come who would like to share data with us on the global platforms? Huge question. Probably there's a lot in that data point of the future about how to scale up the economy and so on and so forth. Next slide. Next slide. So looking into this, what did we do yesterday? It's about traditional statistics, it's input indicators, more money, more people. It's knowledge management. It's research focus, proactive spirit, standardization, ignorance, and low knowledge vulnerability. Today, performance output indicators. What came out of this? Number of students, number of whatever it is, a number of wins, and so on and so forth. Now it's knowledge leadership. But we now go into real-time data and social media. Because to look upon 2-year-old reports about KPIs, it's not so good for the future. We need to understand what is going on today. So that's real-time social media analyzing what kind of knowledge do people have, do they want, do they apply it. It's a reactive spirit, non-standardization, intelligence, it's about knowing, from knowledge to knowing. And the future aspirations, it's now going into a new set of data. It's not KPIs, key performance indicators, it's key IIs, key impact indicators. We need to understand what will impact Lithuania, not perform, what will impact our situation for the future. So we have to balance KPIs with key IIs, what will impact us most. Level of skills, level of technology, level of ethical workforce, level of of gender issues, whatever, you can define it. What is the impact? That would mean we go into the knowledge flow of cultivation and knowledge landscaping, which means that knowledge is not education system, that is long life learning, and we want people to have lifelong employability, not lifelong employment. That's a completely different thing. We have machine learning, IoT, Internet of Things, virtual reality, and so on. We have the interactive spirit, knowledge navigation, and we have the unknown futures, and we have a high availability. Next slide. So that's very just headlines analysis. So what I think is happening right now, based upon a journey I did together with PwC Luxembourg and others of the United Nations, future of knowledge, from planning and mapping to navigation, from ignorance to intelligence, from tangible to intangibles. The intellectual capital is the most important thing in the balance sheet of the government. Think about what Dubai did with insourcing the brand of Guggenheim, for example, or Harvard into their site, into that plot of land, said, we have got this, it's an intangible asset, and we leverage this. And the point was that France got enormous amount of millions, hundreds of millions and billions paid because they outsourced their brand to the Middle East. That's an intangible government asset. It's completely breathtaking to see what is going on in the IC economy, intellectual capital economy. From explicit to tacit knowledge and weak signals, from industries and sectors to integrated ecosystems. From complacency to courageous and energizing visions. From personal profit to a collective purpose. Why are we here? What should we do and how and for who? From general education to personal skills. From boundaries to in-between spaces. From knowing to the unknown, from structures to relationships. And next slide. From centralized hierarchies to distributed knowledge networks. From compliance to value creation. From financial capital to multiple capitals. Sigita spoke about this as well. I think it's financial capital, social capital, intellectual capital, human capital, environmental capital, infrastructural capital, cultural capital, and political capital. If we get the new capitalism in place for the next journey about planning for the future of Lithuania, embracing the future, perceiving, embracing, and receiving futures about what we understand, about what we do, we have a better ride. From full scale to prototyping, from knowledge cities to wise places. You can check out Japan is a great example here. From KPIs to KIIs, from planning to experimenting, from doing to orchestrating and improvisation, from technology focus to include ethics and values in what we do, not least in data governance, from best practice to best option, from knowledge to wisdom, from answers to questions. That summarizes a 400-page report. Next slide. And I will give you an example, because we checked Lithuania as well. Next slide. And here is how the ranks. The top 5, Switzerland, Finland, United States, Singapore, and Luxembourg. Lithuania came number 32. Quite good. About 136 nations are ranked. So you are in the first quarter. And that's very good. So let's look into the next slide. And here's how you're ranked. Pre-university, 31, technological 70, and you can higher education 33. Technical and vocational training, and you're not so good. That's a dropping point, and it's only you ranked 70, the second point here. But otherwise, it's a good situation for the future. And next. And the recommendations in this report is called Global Knowledge Index and Knowledge of the Future. Education challenge, increased government expenditure on primary education. R&D, increased expenditure on research and development. Labor, ease labor regulations and promote ethical work environment. Gender challenge, integrate women into more political work. Environmental challenge, reduce CO2 emissions. I mean, this is what was discussed on high level UN level about understanding what is going on in these 136 nations. I have tons of information to speak to you about. I can't do it. I have no time. This is just a teaser to something for you to look into together with the team of PwC. Next slide. We also did future of a foresight report, from linear to exponential growth. And the next slide is about okay, Instead of using the old techniques of statistics, let's do something different. The conceptual framework model was future of knowledge navigation. What does people talk about in social media in your nation? So we checked out artificial intelligence, blockchain, cybersecurity, biotechnology, future of skills, and said, okay, we can see that Sweden is not talking about AI, but really New Zealand, Israel, Germany, and UAE are on ahead of us. It's amazing. What do we have to do? Well, we have to scale up. We have to accelerate, because if we don't talk about these topics, how can we be leading? And when we took on the other acts, education, science, technology, economy, and environment, enabling environment, what's the impact here if we don't discuss it? This was a prototype done by 36 countries. And I would say it's one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my career up to now. Because this is about real-time knowledge navigation together with the open, together with the people, the citizens, the public. What do they talk about? How do we take that on board with a strategic plan for Lithuania for the next season? Next slide. We could talk for hours. And finally, was another project of IC, National Intellectual Capital. And that's about process capital. That's the effectiveness of the government, administrative effectiveness. Renewable capital is about innovation. Human capital is about skills and education, higher education. And market capital is about the export from Lithuania to other countries. The thing here done by Leif Edwinsson and Carol Yu Lin from Japan says here on the left, Lithuania is better in human capital, and its renewable capital was catching up fast. There is a good chance that Lithuania can be on par with Estonia in national intellectual capital index for the near future, because Estonia has been ahead of you and ahead of many. And this is very interesting. And Sweden and Norway and Finland are declining of intellectual capital. Next slide, which is not easy to interpret, but you should see here, this goes with position, direction, and speed. And it says human capital and renewable capital are long-term intangible assets. Lithuania had the best progress, followed by Norway, Denmark, Estonia, Finland. Sweden was last. They have regression. You are increasing your capital of renewable capital in human capital in your nation. And this we could talk about for hours as well. I just want to give you a little teaser, a little something crisp to start to think about. How can we look into this awesome research project with that team, including your own nation? Next slide. So, stop here. So, intellectual capital is about intelligence capital on the society level. Yes. So next. Yes. And that is structural capital. Next. On organizational level, your organization of government, do you have structural capital that works when you go home in the evening? Or do we only have individual human capital is just working when the people are there in the office? That's the point. And all these layers, next slide. It's about relationship. Back. Relationship capital on society level, do we collaborate with nations? Do we collaborate with organizations? Do we collaborate as individuals in this futuristic policy forum organization of the government of Lithuania? Understanding the relationships and capitals being developed so we can navigate better with intelligence, with better structure, and very professional people. This is another way of looking upon how do we navigate together for the future. Let us then go in and say, okay, what can we learn from other societies and nations? Next slide. Learning from others, Singapore, Dubai, UAE, Luxembourg, and Switzerland. Next slide. So the UAE with highly strong visions and strong motivation, a very different system with the Sheikh system, quick decisions in each emirate. It's just moving, it's just booming. Branding approach, a global hub of everything. World Expo is now coming next year. Dubai Knowledge Summit, which I spoke on last year on these topics about what is going on with the new knowledge navigation and the Arabic world, assessing the Arabic knowledge development. It's an experienced industry, it's key. And the amazing thing is there are insourcing of skills and knowledge like Louvre and Harvard. And that's the strategy. about getting knowledge into the site, into the city, into the territory, into the nation. And they have a strategy of global centers, finance, smart cities, knowledge, life science, and you name it. Different quarters of the city has different names, like internet city, healthcare city, and then they have clusters of the future technologies. And then it's the future technology is the key focus of attracting investment of AI, machine learning, and those kind of things, like also supercomputing and other stuff. And trying to get more sustainable. Of course, that's a problem. But I think they are doing a lot of great things. It's not trying to copy paste, but to go there with your strategic teams when it's allowed to travel, to be inspired. We have a museum of the future in the most amazing arcade. It's a silver bow. So go there and check it out. Next. Next slide. Swiss, extreme decentralization. The cantons run themselves. Local elections, maybe sometimes too many. It's creating a lot of fuss and noise, but also a strong governmental central policy. And this is the nation of not-for-profit. The UN, the Red Cross, the government, and all of these kind of things, which puts a brand on this. But it's also financial industry, and it's also known by innovation. When I think it was the monks in the 1500th century started to measure time, and they created what? They created the watch, the Swiss watch, still the highest brand in the world. Infrastructure focus, not least transportation, rail and trams and mobility issues. You go from the highest to the lowest point in minutes, linked to Zurich. Zurich was the most important, I think, small, big cities with the highest attraction level, which even Google have to move up people from London to Zurich because it was nice to live. Efficiency and KPI focused, more KPI than KII, I would say. Central clear coordination linked to national policy, very strong policy about what to do, not least in Corona. It's a knowledge-based economy, really investing a lot, venture capital and so on. And they are very attractive for future knowledge workers with high levitability, I would say, status. I mentioned Zurich as an example. Again, it's a very interesting nation to study. It's different, like UAE is different. And we need to study the different countries. The Nordics are interesting and the Baltics are interesting, but we need to get new ideas of applying new things. Next slide. Singapore, the city-state out there doing the most incredible thing, and not least in the environmental area. The greenest city on earth, maybe, with all the trees and so on. Strong strategic policy culture because of Lee Kuan Yew, the former prime minister, and his policy office, still in place. I worked for them 5 years ago, and it's really about focus and implementing, and it's prototyping and checking, remake it, and do it right. Never scaling up before we know what to do. It's state capitalism, central decision-making, very clear, whole of government, which includes all state-owned entities. And I would say a key thing for Lithuania is how do you manage your state-owned entities? How do you manage city-owned entities? And I've seen now a trend around the globe about managing state-owned entities or public enterprise as a test bed and a launch pad for innovation of allowing startup companies in Lithuania and Sweden to get their first market and test their technologies and products in collaboration with government. This is an unheard of. And people thought it was illegal. It's not illegal. It's just to make smart, intelligent procurement processes to procure things we don't know about. It's called procurement, innovation procurement. It's an EU policy. It's great opportunities and so on. So the whole of government plus all entities owned by government, I think it's a key thing. A lot to learn. Singapore is always top 10 in public benchmarking or bench learning. We should talk about maybe. Human capital focus, the school system is absolutely top notch. Insourcing innovation, they said to me and others from the Nordics, we are not good in innovation. We share your innovation, we share with delight, we don't steal with pride, but we take your best innovations and we implement them in Singapore because you are good in innovation, but Sweden is not so good in applying and implementing, and that's right. So here is a collaborative approach. They go with our technology, even in the government system. So that's quite amazing. and so on, not least the food and water issues. Desalination, salt water getting fresh water, planting of trees, as I see here, a strong green strategy, very strong. Urban regeneration programs, especially committee of the Prime Minister together with the Mayor of Singapore is making this, it's very much urban 2.0 approach. High-level security and safety for citizens, including food safety, including data and security and IT security and cybersecurity issues. Social programs are increasing, like the social housing, but they have a very futuristic approach, practical deliveries with efficiency. It's a very interesting city. Next, finally, Luxembourg. Ooh, let's breathe for a second. So Luxembourg, diversification of economy sectors, investment of this for historical steel and agriculture to finance, now to life science, and now to space. I can see that Luxembourg have always been on their toes to understanding what is next focus of EU funding. And they often get it, because they're positioning themselves in Brussels. How do Lithuania position ourselves in Brussels, in Luxembourg, in the different EU institutions? How often do we travel? How often do we spend time to understanding what's going on? That's the key thing about the knowledge economy, to say we are ready to execute, we are ready to make a prototype, we are ready to be in this test bed, we are ready to do something together with you. Because they're always open and invite states and cities to come to prototype with the EU. Are we there or are we not? That's the question. Support industry through policy-led top-down clusters initiatives. The Lux Innovation has been one of the world's best examples of innovation hubs, of innovation clusters, for going to good to super clusters, to go to from cluster to cluster of clusters, which is new in between spaces, like from agriculture to food. New technologies and new processes and how to develop. Investment in infrastructure, 5G, AI, and cross-cutting enabler for all sectors. And also they attract a lot of big companies, Google, Amazon, and they have about center there, including Skype. The tax level, of course, is a key thing in the competition, I would say, to be fair and honest. And also I think there is a lot of good examples, even from PwC, which is a highly regarded company in Luxembourg, as in Lithuania and everywhere, of course. The investment up to reskilling and the workforce. The Skills Bridge initiative was led by, was an idea from PwC, what the government of Luxembourg said, this is the way to do it. Faster, better, smarter. So I would say connect with PwC. Now you already connect with Sweden, that's great, and connect with Luxembourg as well, because here you can make really, really good shortcuts for Lithuania with the team on the site, on the ground in Lithuania. So attracting international skilled workforce, that has been a key objective for a long time, and we see that's been happening also as we speak. So that's Luxembourg in a kind of in a nutshell. Next. So coming to land here, future vision, steps to the future. I mean, Plato said, knowledge is about facts and beliefs. We need to believe in what fact we understand is accurate and it's impacting our nation. We can go from facts, information, to knowledge in a context, to understand the knowledge predicaments, and to get the skills. As I said, we are overeducated but underskilled. We need experience, what gives us wisdom, and tacit knowledge, who creates the welfare and societal growth. And societal growth doesn't come just when you just click the fingers. But we need to leapfrog here, new skills, new focus on future skills and its development. Personal and corporate level. I also think it's about that when we look into the education and the human capital, and we think about the knowledge management, that's old procedures. We need to talk about knowledge flow. Who are the knowledge creators of the future? Who are the knowledge platforms? Who are the knowledge policymakers? What are the knowledge technologies? So I would say people today are over-managed knowledge management People are overmanaged but underled. That's a huge problem. And how do we come into a new level of understanding, of collaboration, of understanding? And as was said, it's not about war, it's about friendship. And I understand the war metaphor very well. So it's good, no problem. It's very good. Because we need to figure out how do we gather the troops of knowledge workers, including those who don't have the high level competence yet, to come into the future of the knowledge society. And Corona does today put people in an unemployment, because the strategies in the major companies here in Sweden, Lund, I've been working with the last months, there was a digitalization robot strategy for 2022. That strategy is now already in place this autumn. So people who went redundant of a heavy break, go down from 100 to 50%, are not coming back. Why? Because the digitalization strategy was leapfrogging the whole process of applying new methodologies and technologies. So this needs of better knowledge and skills for the Swedish workers are just now incredible. Finally, societal development and growth we need to redefine entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is to understand the in-between space, entreprendre, to see in between and to do something. So we need social entrepreneurs, societal entrepreneurs, political entrepreneurs, government entrepreneurs, and of course business entrepreneurs and art entrepreneurs. That's the wider perspective which EU now says future of entrepreneurship is beyond profit and business. Next slide. So knowledge for all, are there serious attempts by your government to transform into a knowledge society? That was the question we asked in this Future of Knowledge report. And the general conclusion were comprehensive integrated education system, continuous training, upskilling, reskilling, advanced digital infrastructure, 5G, create an open economy, research development and innovation, and focus on foresearch, not research. Research is history, foresearch is future. Foresearch has no evidence base, but it's the reality. Next slide. Questions? So I ended 1 minute too early, sorry for that, but I think it's okay. Sorry for being too energized about thinking about what you're doing, but hopefully we got a little scan of a huge landscape. So up for discussion. Thank you very much, my friends.
Thank you, Jan, for the exciting presentation. And I see that Aušrinė and Agne are raising their hands. So Aušrinė, let's start with your questions.
Thank you very much for so extremely interesting presentation. And I have many questions, but I think I shall stay only one. It was very interesting to hear about future ministry. Can you explain how do you imagine how it can be in practice?
Yeah. Well, I think what happened in Finland was when the wall fell, Russia is transforming into something unknown. The very insightful ministers and presidents and prime ministers in Finland said, we need a completely new ministry. So we need to think about how do we position Finland in the future without Russia. That was the beginning. And then they started a committee. They didn't create a ministry, but they created a standing committee in the parliament. It was called the Committee of the Future. And one of the chairmen was Markku Markkula, a friend of mine. He is now leaving the European Commission, and he's now back in Finland. And it was to ask some questions and on some parameters every second week, trying to reposition Finland for the next season. So I would say this, if I should be a minister or in government leadership, I should try to say, let's do a prototype with the same ingredients, but now it's a new season, but let's get focused in the parliament, in the ministry, every second week on the future. Everybody's talking about history.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Aušrinė, for the question. Let's move to Agnes' question then.
Hello, once again, Jan, thank you. It's really interesting to hear. And I have also many questions, but maybe I'll stick to a few of them. You several times mentioned the importance of innovations and also the importance of experimentation, moving from planning to experimentation. But at least our Lithuanian reality, let's say, culture does not allow politicians to experiment, to have these innovations put in life without truly saying, oh yes, they will be correct, they will work, definitely they will work. So what are your recipes to present the experimentation and innovations to societies, to make them believe that they are needed? Thank you.
Well, I would say, I think but Jessica and I maybe share a part of this in our own nation sometimes, but we've been much better the last 15, 20 years. I think it's about a cultural change, a mindset issue. And I think it's about say, okay, how do we as human beings learn? We learn by doing and testing. And I think government has a full-fledged test bed in every sector, in every area. I figured out last year that the incubator and the science park called KRI-Nova, K-R-I Nova, a food and science incubator, they said we should use the whole ecosystem in our city for environmental and food issues, food and drink and environment. So even vodka, the Absolute vodka, the Renault Pernod, the French company who bought Absolute vodka, said, we make a test bed on your site. Why is that relevant? Because knowledge develops where we increase the frequency. And it is a faster frequency instead of this very slow frequency. We need to go of interaction, of trying to learn what is happening, of testing things. So increased frequency, have a higher density, which means more stakeholders into this to help cross-government, cross-private, cross-not-for-profit, cross-university, say, let's focus on the issue of food. Wherever it comes from, it's the issue of food, or it's the issue of water. It's not about technology, it's not about agro, it's not about fishing, it's about food. And finally, make the friction as low as possible. Allow yourself to make a free zone so you can test at least in some key areas. Governmental controlled, policy regulated, so everybody says, okay, let's make a test bed. Let's make a free zone in Lithuania in these two industries, technology and life science, maybe. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Jan. Actually, I also have my question, Jan, to you. So we heard Sigita's presentation where she has presented that it is intended to make an update, a renewal of Lithuania's strategy 2030. What would be your thoughts? What are the success factors in this journey?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question of the day, as the others. But let me say, number one, it's to be very clear about what we dream of. Sometimes people just dream to dream, and that doesn't fly, because we will never know if we have arrived or not. We can end up wherever. Oh, that is great. Yeah, it could be great, but that was not where we should go. So the number one, a very strong vision, and some areas in that vision, what we really want to accomplish. Number two, try to understand what is the public and the companies in Lithuania talking about now. What is the key message they bring when we look upon the platform of Facebook, of LinkedIn, of Instagram, etc., as I just showed, this 36 nations. What is going on in this? Then you can say, okay, linked to what we was thinking about as a vision, people are really excited when we talk about future of technology, future of skills, blockchain, IC security. Wow, we are, well, so then you can come to the third point, trust. How do we get trust in between the people of the nation and the political leaders, and including leaders of the private sector. Because I think there is a need now with a high level transparency, a high level decision making, and as I would say the fourth point, to never underestimate that people will not be very happy with a control mechanism of surveillance systems like China has got. China is a very interesting weak signal about where are the Eastern world heading. And I've been working a lot in China. I was back in November. I sensed that the smart cities I helped the Chinese government to develop 5 years ago has turned into a digital prison. People don't want to live in a digital prison. People want, I said the European Commission some weeks ago, we need digital freedom. And I think Europe and Lithuania has a great opportunity to have a much better governance, of course, security, of course, high level security, but not that control mechanism which will take away what? The innovation of the people. That's, I think, because this is building trust. That will be my recommendations to start with.
Thank you, Jan. Very excited to hear your thoughts. Aušrine, do we have another question from you?
Excuse me?
No, it's okay. I just saw Aušrine raised hand again.
No, sorry. It's from last time, but I have more questions.
Okay, no problem at all. Do we have any more questions to Jan? I urge you to use this opportunity to leverage and learn on the experiences and everything that Jan has seen in his career. Okay, if we have no more questions, then thank you, Jan, once more. It was super exciting, and I have to admit that it's very inspirational. Then let's move to our last presentation before the break, where Jessica will present an example of Sweden with the long-term strategic planning. Jessica, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Okay. Shall you start with a short introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Jessica Carragher-Wallner, and I'm also very grateful to be here today and honored to be here to speak on behalf of Sweden and talk about the strategic Swedish perspective. I'm a senior advisor in leadership, scenario planning, digital transformation. I do a lot of vision, strategy, and those kind of things for PwC Sweden. I'm also the smart city lead for PwC Sweden in our global network. I've been working with the scenario planning for many years, so I'm super excited to be here today and tell you a bit more about that, and actually to work together with you in that. And I was excited to hear the first presentation about how Lithuania is navigating in this area, and I think we will have a great time in the end of the day today when we are working with scenarios. When Jan is talking, I've been working with Jan for a couple of years in PwC Sweden and after that as well. You know, you get into the mood, you're so inspired. And I'm going to talk about the Swedish perspective, but I need to start with something else first. I need just to say, what are we in Sweden talking about right now? And I don't think it's only Sweden. This is post or in the middle of COVID-19. I think Jan mentioned it. Tech and automation plans, if they were set for 2023 or 2025, they're already here. So everything I am going to talk about is really strategic planning in Sweden until now, because we don't know if this is going to change right now. We can also see the increase of power from big tech actors. I'm coming back to that later, but we can see that they are in different areas and wanting to interact in societies in a different way. So I'm going to come back to that later. We also see that foreign powers seek influence in major companies in Sweden and in Norway, in the Nordics, And what does that mean? We also see that short-term focus ensures survival now, but it endangers the long-term success. So that is also why it is so important now to really take this grip around strategic planning and scenario planning. And I've been working with the Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Finance in Sweden. I've been working with the National Agency for Special Needs Education, but I also worked in the private sector. So I've worked in scenarios for Volvo cars. So we have that, the both perspective, the public and the private. And I kind of think that's very important. And I also want to lift one other thing. The first presenter said, to innovate, to have these places where you can go and innovate, like labs. And as John said, many companies and many organizations do have them. And I will get back to that because Swedish the municipalities and ministries, they actually also have them. But we, PwC Sweden, also have one. So we bring our clients there to test. And I'm going to talk some more about that later. But I think we could move on to the presentation then. Yes. Okay, so before I begin, I think I want to go back to that Sweden and Finland, they have a decentralized kind of government, and Norway and Denmark are much more hierarchical. So that's kind of the point we need to go from. So that means, I know that you probably know this since you know Sweden, but I want to go back on that because this is really what defines our overall strategic planning. Because Sweden is governed in a special way. That means that the government office agency has a government office. And from there they can give, can you hear me?
Yes, Jessica, it's all right. We can hear you.
Because I can't see the picture anymore.
But we hear you and we see the presentation. Do you see the presentation? Okay. Yes.
I have papers in front of me, so I don't see the presentation really, but I can go on anyway. So we have the government office that has the overall governance over the country, but we also have the regions. And we have 21 counties in Sweden, and we also have 290 municipalities. And the interesting part with this is that the government office is actually delegating a lot of the powers down to the regions and to the municipalities, which means that for strategic planning, as of today, it is delegated to regions and municipalities, and also to some ministries. So if I talk about the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Finance is responsible for the strategic planning of the finances. If I talk to the Ministry of Education, they are responsible for the strategic planning for the Ministry of Education. And so also the regions, they have the strategic responsibility for the planning of that region, and so also has the municipalities. So it's a delegated kind of power. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an overall mission. But like the UK example, there is no Sweden 2050. It's a culture and a tradition for Sweden to have it that way. But we have tried it different ways, and I will come back to that in a moment. So the work with strategic foresight depends on the needs and the wishes of the government, but it's not regulated from that office. There is certain topics that I also will get back to, where the mission appoints different groups to work for strategies that goes over the nation. The government has some consulting councils doing that, but the municipal councils and city councils also have that responsibility. And that can sound like everyone is doing the same thing, but it's not really that, I would say. So if we move on. Go to the next slide. I will try to get back to you on this. There was actually, in the 60s in Sweden, there was a discussion coming up that isn't it important to have this strategic foresight done from the ministry or the government. And it took a while. I think it was a discussion, a bigger discussion about that in 1972. But in 1973, there actually was a secretariat for future studies. So even if it was in the beginning of the 70s, we actually had it. And we had it for a while. And it was conducting some research. It was taking out the strategic foresight that actually was reported to the Prime Minister. But since they were conducting a lot of research, there was this discussion in the 80s, is it really appropriate for that kind of strategic research, not foresight now only, also research, to be conducted so close to the Prime Minister? So what happened was they decided that they would be a standalone agency from that on, from 1987. So that is funded somewhat by the government, but also from other research institutions. So there's the leader of the Swedish Institute for Future Studies is appointed by the government, but it is still a standalone agency where they can conduct different kind of research, but they choose that for themselves. It's not the government choosing what they are doing for research. So this Institute for Future Studies is really very often included in all government, when governments have workshops or we talk about the economy or we talk about sustainability. There are people from this Swedish Institute for Future Studies. It's very well known in Sweden. And the board, it consists of 9 people that are selected to kind of create that exciting and environment that is inflated from different parts of the society. And today, the Institute consists of 90 people that usually work around part-time. There is 10 administrators that are there all the time, but then those 90 people, they shift because it depends on what kind of research is going on. And the current research program is called What Future and challenges the choices for the 21st century. And it runs between 2015 and it's going to end this year in 2020. But I had a conversation with them just before coming here if they wanted to send something to you. And they said that the interesting part here, and I think Jan said it as well, is that everything that they have looked upon and that we have predicted for the future is somewhere else right now. It's either moving very much faster or is going another way. And I think I will come back to that when I introduce the scenario planning work. But the fact is really that those fundamentals that we have been talking about, like megatrends, economic shift, sustainability, technological breakthroughs, and those things, they are kind of shivering. So those things that we have been taking for certain, or the powers are moving fast, and we are so thinking that they are so secure in what they are creating with their pace and power, that is really shifting, and that is scaring a lot of people. So even the Institute for Future Studies said what we have to do now is go into our research and studies and look at. You could call it the COVID-19 effect, but I think that's too simple. It's more like when powers start to shake a bit, what are the consequences for societies? And that could be for environment, that could be for tech, that could be for anything really. So, but this is really a fundament in a Swedish institution today, and it's also part of what I'm going to talk about, lessons learned about Sweden, because this is really one of them. I think we can move on. Okay, so there's really very many examples that you could bring up that Sweden or the ministries or the municipalities or the regions are doing today. But I have picked out some, and I picked out from a national perspective. And then I want to come back to something that I didn't mention before, and that was the fact that we, as I said, today we don't have this strategic planning or secretariat for that, but we've had that. In 2014 to 2016, we actually did. And we also had a future minister. And during that time, they worked in different projects, and it was an initiative. And I think also I have to mention that what Jan said, that you need to test things, and you need to be able to try out different things. This is a good example where this secretariat for the future for strategic planning actually was being tested. But the evaluation of that was that at that time, it wasn't the best thing. And I want to say at that time, because that time might be now. Maybe we weren't really mature enough to have that. I don't know. But it didn't work then, but that is not to say that it wouldn't work now. Anyway, so this Secretariat for Future for Strategic Planning had this this project. It was a mission called The Future. And there was a project from February 2015, and it ended in April 2016, where this final report was submitted to the government. And it consisted of 3 parts. The green transition, about sustainability and how to bring that further, and how to be competitive in this. The future of work and the future of workplace, the future of work as in employees, what is going to be the workforce for the future, and also how you could address or look at global cooperation. Those 3 things were appointed as the most important parts of this future study. And there was this future minister that had appointed these groups with these themes. And there were representatives from the business sector, civil society, organizations, and research institute. And that's also something that I'm going to bring up later, because you kind of need the broader perspective to look at things, to create those discussions where that Jan was talking about, and also bring in the citizens. So the task was to identify the challenges and problems, formulate a vision, develop strategies, and deliver suggestions on priority measures in the medium and in the longer term. And for all the things that we look at or look upon now, there is really the importance to look at it in a short perspective and the consequences of how we act in the short perspective and in the long perspective. So since this was the Secretariat for Strategic Development, and it was in the government office, it was supported. It supported the work of the mission of the government. So this was really created under this special time in Sweden, where we have this future minister, and where we had an office for strategic planning. So that's one example. And if you have more questions on this project, I can tell you more about it later. But I think it's a good example. So what I have mentioned is the Institute for Future Studies as something important, and this was during that time where we had a future office for strategic development and a future minister. I think we can move forward to the next. So I said also that there could be, the government can appoint a group of people or a group that has a task. And this is one of those examples. Even though municipalities, regions, and the Ministry for Digitalization in Sweden are responsible for taking out strategic foresight, there can also be a task picked out for a certain group that is said to look at the task on a national level. So this is one of those examples, and it's a very good example because, as you can see, the Digital Commission was between 2012 and 2015, and still today that work is in motion. So the task from the beginning was for this group to make a situational analysis, to identify strategic areas that should be considered in the digitalization policy, to investigate the need for promotion at the national level, and to follow up the work on the regional digital agendas. And as you all know, the digital is one of those forces that goes very quick, and there are different possibilities in different regions and different municipalities to deal with it themselves. So the bigger cities perhaps are more not just mature, but have the possibilities and the budgets to do more. But then there are municipalities with the same needs that maybe don't have the same opportunity to do this. Anyway, so in 2016, the Digital Commission had the task to publish reports about the effects of the digitalization on individuals and on society, and support the government's effort in promoting digitalization issues. So there was a number of writers. There were many active in academia, research institute, and industry were also again engaged to contribute to the report. So it wasn't government officials only that was taking out this on writing it down and doing research. There was really this cross-function work. And for this case, there was also different consulting firms in there to support different parts of this. And I will also talk more about that when we talk about scenario planning in what is simple, what can you do by yourself, where do you need consultant support usually, and what is the new thing where you actually need to do this large moves, which means that you might not just take the help from consultants, you might need partners in doing that. And so today, the work of the Digital Commission has actually evolved into some kind of a vision of a sustainable digital Sweden, who is going to be the best in the world to use the opportunities of digitalization. And they are divided up into different parts. So it's digital competence, it's digital safety, it's digital innovation, it's digital leadership, and it's also digital infrastructure. And if you look at each of these, there are different implications, of course, but we are not as good in the digital Sweden in all of these. And usually when I talk about how digital we are, I say that we are the fat cat in the corner, because we are very good and we have been good in Sweden for a long time in innovation and digital. But what you look at now is countries that are doing progress and looking at what are they doing, because that's where innovation is actually being made, and that's how we move forward when tech and digital is really forcing us forward. So to be good today does not mean that you will be good or absolutely not the best tomorrow. And there is also the second thing that I would like to point out from a Swedish point of view. And here I don't know the Lithuanian point of view in this, but we are not really good in digital safety. And with that, also with the COVID-19 perspective, I would say that being forced out in the digital, we're doing this digitally now, has left us with a digital debt. Because we now have to handle the consequences of all of us being pushed out in the digital. So this is why this kind of work and this kind of example is one of, I think, one of the best I could give you, because everyone is in the digital, but it has been going on for a long time and it's still evolving. And I also want to tell you that what is up now in Sweden, the latest on this, and it's from December 2019, the suggestion is to start to work with digital showrooms, to work in all these areas: competency, safety, innovation, leadership, and infrastructure. And still in this more collaborative way. So that is also what Sweden is doing. So I think that's a good example. We can move on. And what I also wanted to share with you, because as I said, there are so many examples, but one thing that is really work in progress that I wanted to share, because of the fact that this is so important right now, we're in this right now, is again, this is regional responsibility, and it's also municipality responsibility. But what the region of Stockholm actually is doing right now is, due to COVID-19, they are initiated analysis of how the region responded at the COVID-19 outbreak from a management point of view. And I would say that would, look at how management actually, not the crisis management, is more of the management in different areas. What kind of decisions were taking, or what kind of responses did each part of the region do when there was new legislation and new policy and recommendations. So what we have been doing is we've set up a timeline with all the new directives that has come from the government. Because in Sweden, there has been a lot of things happening. And one of the effects of the COVID-19 was really that the government needed more power to take some of the decisions, without going into total Sweden how it works. But the government needed to take the right decisions and take them fast. They needed more power. So this was a very big discussion in Sweden in the beginning of this. So we took out a timeline for March, and we took out a timeline for April. And we're now working with when this happened. What was the response, or what kind of decisions did we take? In Sweden, we closed the gymnasiums for schools for children from 16 to 19. Those were closed, and there was a digital education. But the other ones, for the smaller children, was not closed, as you know. And all of these everything in this had to be managed, as an example. So we're going through this, and actually what we also did is we took the Nordic perspective on it. So we also looked at what kind of decisions were taken in Finland, what kind of decisions were taken in Norway, and of course also in Denmark, because that also affected the people, the citizens of Sweden, that I think Jan said, the subject of trust and transparency has become really, really important in this process and during the COVID-19 time. So when the schools were closed in Finland or in Norway, it affected Sweden. So and then looking at it from a Nordic perspective, and still evaluate what did we do from a management perspective and what can we learn from that. It's also a way to prepare for the future, because when we say, as Jan said, when we say, oh, we didn't know that this pandemic would come now. No, we didn't know that it was coming now, but we did know that it could come. And when I talk about this in Sweden, I usually talk about all the people that came from from Syria and in 2015 to Sweden. And we were kind of shocked that there were so many people coming in a very short time. And then I said, well, couldn't that happen? And they said, no, we couldn't know. And I said, couldn't you? And they said, yeah, of course we could, but we just didn't know when. Yeah, but that will never again be a reason not to be prepared. And I think COVID-19 is telling us that. So we need to work with uncertainties, and we need to be prepared. And sometimes someone asks me, is it which scenario will we end up with? And I said, no, that's not the point with scenarios. With scenarios, it's more like being prepared for different outcomes. And I think the first speaker today said that in a very good way. We need to prepare ourselves for these different things. And that means that the Institute for Future Studies needs to bring that into the research more. That means that the digital agenda in Sweden needs to take that into consideration. And I would say that we need to do an evaluation, not only for the crisis, but for how we handle this uncertainty, because this is really a possibility to learn so much from our behavior. I think we can move on. Next. Okay, so going back to lessons learned about strategic foresight in Sweden. It's really critically important to ensure independence of an office conducting strategic foresight research. I really want to stress research. If you have it, it has to be independent. But that's not the same as strategic foresight planning. So that's my point. The Swedish Institute for Future Studies is partly funded by the government, but is a standalone institution. And I think this is a strong fundament for strategic research in Sweden. It's crucial to engage government officials, politicians, academia, research institute, and experts in the process of co-creation and do this mix. And why is that? It's not like everyone is going to decide everything, because that's also it's an interesting thought that we also can see maybe coming up in the future. But it is really to get those strategic discussions with different points of view. We need that. And often when I work with government officials in Sweden, even though they have a lot of information and they have a lot of materials, they, as any business leader or anyone else says, how do we know that we are right? And this is the why it's important to bring in the different perspectives. And I would also say that in the future, it's going to be so much more crucial to also involve the citizens in this. And there is also things going on in that, much more co-creation. I actually said to our own, I'm doing the strategic planning and scenario analysis for PwC Sweden right now in this situation we're in. And one thing that I told them was that everything is getting more open source. We want to learn much more from everyone else. So maybe we, as a consultancy firm, we will not be the experts in the future, because they want to ask business leader, research institute, much more the citizens, and they are the co-creators of the society of tomorrow. So I think this is really something to look at, because this is really taking place in society of tomorrow. Okay, so it's also important to test different approaches to work with strategic foresight, and test and test and test again. I think that also was mentioned before, but we need to take away something that I would call the fear scare of institutions and organizations. We need to test, to fail, to test again, to learn, to succeed. So this is also something, as I said, we had an office as a secretariat for strategic planning. It didn't work then. It was good, but it wasn't fit for the purpose right then. But again, it could be something for the future or something else. But the thing is, best. The positive outcome with the chain of command in Sweden is that the government officers are trusted to be expert on their area, and they are delivering insights to the government, both by request, but also as a part of their own strategic agenda for their area of expertise. This is also interesting because I have worked with different regions in Sweden when it comes to implementing a national strategy or a national part of a strategy. The last was the national strategy of foods, and it was a group that was working with that and taking it out, and it was to be implemented by the regions and from there implemented to the municipalities. And since there was a national strategy, there were no co-creation from regions and municipalities in that way. And we can also see it was much more different. It's not impossible, but much more difficult to make it go all the way down to the smallest municipality. So the level of co-creation and the level of working bottom up is really a success factor. There are of course difficulties with this as well, but I'm focusing on the good parts now. There's actually several areas that are better managed in a cross-functional way. This is, and I think that the digital agenda is a good example of that. It's where a special committee often is appointed with the tasks to look at, like digitalization, innovation, sustainability, or an overall national level. But then we come back to what I just said. It's then the approach to make it happen on each place has to be in another way, because this is really crucial. It can feel that it's so far away from where things is actually happening. And another thing combined with testing is actually to dare. You need to dare more and work outside the box, inside the laws and regulations, of course, but make them work for you and dare more. Yeah, that is actually where I'm going to end for now. There is a lot of things that you can say, but no, I want to say one more thing actually. It's a quote that I like concerning all strategic foresight and scenario planning. And you know Jeff Bezos, head of Amazon, he says, day 2 is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by painful decline, followed by death. And that is why it should always be day 1. Thank you. We can't hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Thanks a lot. Now it's time to continue with our questions to Jessica. I see Agne has one, so maybe we can start with Agne's question.
Sorry that I'm so annoying and asking questions every time, but it's really interesting for me. I'm really happy that this discussion is happening. So actually, Jessica, thank you. Also, you gave a lot of, I guess, practical issues for our strategic foresight and for Strata, the organization that is responsible for many foresight and many analysis should be done for the government. And actually, my question is related with the independence. You mentioned several times of the research of people. We have an interesting point at the moment to discuss with our top managers is actually the analysis, the preparational analysis that we are about to start, and Sigita has presented, should be done in the period that parliamentary elections are coming. So there is a fear that this analysis, which requires, which the process also, as we mentioned, requires a lot of discussions with society, with associations, and so on, so that it would not be seen as political, activities to engage people in parliamentary elections. So maybe you can just give any examples, any thoughts how it's dealt in Sweden. It's a different culture, but anyway, maybe there were some points. Thank you.
Yeah, if I understand you right, again, I repeat this, is it that since there are public
parliament elections?
Yeah, elections, yes. It's blurring, so I'm sorry. I wasn't know if you were there. The elections coming up, and if you engage people, it might be seen as, yeah, okay, then I'm with you. I would say it would be probably somewhat the same in Sweden, and I would say that usually at that time, it's seldom done in Sweden. Then it's the government officials that are working with it. It's not politicians. They can have their questions, but you really need to separate. So it's not, work is one thing and election is another thing. That's what I want to say. So in those areas I have been in, there has not been politicians in those discussions at election time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Aušrinė as well.
Yeah, thank you for interesting presentation. Question would be also about you. You just have mentioned that when strategic ideas are going to small municipalities, you face some problems, yes? So what kind of tools do you use to implement them, encourage or somehow to get implemented these ideas to the practice again?
Good question. Good question. It's different. Like when it was the National Strategy for Foods, we were working together with all the municipalities in that region. So we were workshopping together and we were talking about how you could implement it on a municipality level. And after that, we needed to support each municipality for themselves because they have different challenges depending on what kind of municipality they have. But it's really working closer together to be with them on that journey. Because if it's like everything, if you give them the report, it depends on if someone picks it up. So if you want to implement it, you need to be there all the time, and you need to be there to see it work. And in Sweden, the challenges that can be is that are the politicians, local politicians in that municipality prioritizing this strategy because they don't need to. It's a recommendation from the government. So some municipalities do this really great now, and they work with that. And from a sustainable point of view, it was really interesting also because they have different challenges. Some of them are self-producing, and some of them are not. So then the food strategy means different. But since it's a recommendation, you can only recommend them and you can try working with them, but they don't have to do it. But you need to be there all the way.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question from Ligita Vaičiūnienė. Sweden is a strong country as regards implementation of sustainable development goals. You even had ministry for sustainable development.
Yes.
How the United Nations Agenda 2030 and SDGs are integrated into long-term strategic planning?
Again, I would say that it's something that is really important in Sweden right now, and I think also Jan could comment on this. But those goals are implemented in every ministry, in every region, and in every municipality today, and it's very high up on everybody's agenda. We know how important this is, and this is also a good example of when I talked about why is it so easy to work in the short term and in the long term, because sustainability and these things, the COVID-19 has really pushed the short-term agenda away a bit, but that will give consequences in the long run, because this is a really important topic. But it is implemented all the way, and I would say it's an issue that we talk and care a lot about in Sweden.
Thanks a lot. Jan, do you have anything to add on this?
I don't think so. I think it was a great presentation, great answer. But maybe I think there's an extremely strong commitment from the Swedish government, including the cities and regions, to be to position themselves to be in all kind of development work of the SDGs, whatever sector it is all about. And I think it's on a high Prime Minister's level. It was even said in the UN, we are there to be frontiers in some of these areas. And I think that is really good, because it sparks the level of motivation from our nation.
And if I can add something again, that I was talking to the Ministry of Finance just before this, and I said, so since we are this decentralized country, what is, when you go abroad and talk to other nations, what do you meet there? Then they usually say that how is it possible to have so much decentralized power in a country like Sweden? And for us, as we said, it's really culture. It's been like this for a very long time. But he also said that, yes, sometimes it's hard to explain how this is really working, but the strategic foresight and strategic planning is really an important part of every ministry, every region, and every municipality, and have been that for a long time. The thing that everyone now maybe works a bit harder on and more on is the scenario planning, I would say.
Can I add here, because the history tells us it's 400 years ago, basically, since Sweden took an act in the national parliament that you could not be in the parliament and be a civil servant as a government leader.
Yeah.
So it's a really strong old culture. I think that's what we see. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Yeva, I saw you raising your hand, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, I had a pretty technical question, I guess. It was related to independence of the institutions, and especially the Swedish Institute for Future Studies that Jessica presented. So Jessica, you mentioned that this institute is partially budgeted, financed by the government, and also the head of the institute is nominated by the government. So how these things do not ruin the whole independence of the whole institution? How does that?
Yeah, but it's a really good question, but it's the way it's working, and it's also, I would say, is being questioned today. If you can call yourself an independent part when there's a nomination. But it's the same really for the ministries, where the government appoints the head of that ministry. But it is an issue that is lifted. But if you compare it to how it was, when it really was a part of the government, it was harder then to decide, or not harder, it was more controversial to decide what the research was going to be about. So this is kind of a middle way, but it is really seen as a own entity, even if it's nominated, and there is some funding, but the major part of the funding is coming from universities and other institutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions to Jessica? If not, then thanks a lot, Jessica, for this presentation on the Sweden experience and the way how Sweden runs it. We actually have approached our break, and therefore we have a little bit more than half an hour to do our break. So you are all free to choose, do you want to disconnect or just mute yourselves? So it's up to you. The most important part is that we come back together here at 12:45 for the second part of our discussion.
Okay.